some borderline stuff in terms of emergency podcasts, but we didn't end up doing them. Again, see St. Patrick's Day and NC State's miraculous tournament run. Aaron Donald hung up his cleats and walked away from football. A big blow to my Rams. The hope that the Rams would maybe make another Super Bowl run this year. But Donald had been thinking about doing this for the last couple of years. Sean McVay talked him back into it. People joke all the time. It's like first, like talk about like the Hall of Fame chances for certain players. But I mean, like Aaron Donald is. I think he's the greatest defensive player of all time. He's one of the 2 or 3 greatest defensive players of all time. I think you put him up there with like Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White, and a mortal lock for the Hall of Fame. Really, the only 2022 maybe breach, the only sort of pock on his resume.
Yeah, it really blows my mind that we're talking about someone who only played for 10 seasons being an absolute lock. But Brenton, look, I know that sometimes you exaggerate about locks for the Hall of Fame, and sometimes Wilson gives you funny faces. But if he was here right now, no one would, because this seems like a slam dunk. I mean, we were talking about someone who was first team All-Pro in 8 of his 10 seasons. We were talking about someone who was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, tied for the most in NFL history with J.J. Watt and Lawrence Taylor. We were just talking about someone who was absolutely dominant on the interior of the defensive line, which is just not something – we don't see that kind of dominance from that spot. We haven't seen it over the past 2 decades besides Aaron Donald. And personally, I mean, I literally have nightmares every night about the Bengals' final offensive play in Super Bowl 56, when 4th and 1, you get 1 yard, you got to get a first down, getting field goal range, get Evan McPherson, tie the game. But no, Aaron Donald blew that up. Ja'Marr Chase was running wide open down the sideline. If Joe Burrow gets an extra 0.5 of a second to throw the ball, the Bengals probably win that game, but they didn't, because Hall of Famer Aaron Donald made a Hall of Fame play, blew through the line, put pressure on Burrow, and that was it. I mean, how many defensive players get to make a game-winning play in the Super Bowl? So yeah, Aaron Donald, definite Hall of Famer.
I think it's a good point that you bring up, Breach, that he's doing all of this. You look at all his numbers, you look at his All-Pros, Defensive Player of the Year stuff, as an interior defensive lineman. I mean, you'll talk about who's the greatest defensive player of all time. You'll hear Lawrence Taylor, J.J. Watt might even get thrown in there. But those guys, a lot of it came from the edge. This dude was doing it all from the interior, which is just such a much more difficult area on that defensive line to put up stats. And the fact that he was able to and make those types of impact plays. You're talking about the Super Bowl against the Bengals, the one against the Patriots, Super Bowl 53 or whatever it was. Devin McCourty had a tweet right after he announced his retirement that Bill Belichick, you can still remember him saying that this dude will wreck the game. This guy will blow everything up humanly possible. And when you have one of the greatest head coaches, maybe the greatest head coach of all time, saying that about a singular player heading into a Super Bowl, that just shows how great he was.
40th all time, tied 40th of all time in sacks from the interior defensive line, and playing for a career that wasn't like Julius Peppers, 5th all time in sacks with 159. I mean, he played forever. Donald, I mean, if you recall, coming out, actually fell in the draft because of his size. People thought he was too small. They were worried he wouldn't hold up against NFL pass rush playing at Pittsburgh. I remember seeing him live just because the matchups, and I thought he was probably the best player in the draft. I wish I'd written that down as a hot take, because it obviously ended up being correct really, really quickly. And he dominated. He's an incredible player from Jump Street. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year in his first year. As Breach pointed out, 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in a 4-year span. He also finished 2nd in his 2nd year, 4th in his 3rd year. He somehow wasn't All-Pro, first-team All-Pro his first season, which is just sort of a mistake. He was a Pro Bowler and he was Defensive Rookie of the Year, and it was just kind of a screw-up. And then in 2022, they really just shut him down. He still made the Pro Bowl, but they shut him down early after 11 games because he was a little dinged up. They wanted to make sure he could come back last year and make a run, and he was his typical dominant self in 2023. I think, it's actually interesting. Like J.J. Watt, our colleague J.J. Watt probably wins a couple more Defensive Player of the Year awards, or Aaron Donald maybe wins a couple more without J.J. Watt. The fact that those two guys are at the same time is pretty remarkable, and just an incredible career for Aaron Donald.